Terry, thanks very much. The mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, says he expects the number of casualties from today's attacks really to be more than the city can handle.
That's in addition to the thousands of injuries that are expected. Emergency personnel are scrambling to treat people in two of the nation's busiest cities. Immediate concerns center around the blood supply and the amount of blood available for victims. We go now live to Jim Armstrong at the American Red Cross offices. Jim, what's going on there?
Well, Allison and Keith, first and foremost, it's clear people in the Carolinas care and they want to do something. I am live at the American Red Cross Grand Strand office. If you take a look behind me, you see it's absolutely packed with people. It's been this way all day long. People have turned out in the hundreds looking to do whatever they can, donating blood and trying to help this situation. The response was fast, the need obvious.
It's the least we could do.
The Grand Strand branch of the American Red Cross has overflowed with donors since news of the attacks broke. No one woke up this morning planning to give blood, but hundreds did, even if it meant waiting in line for hours for the privilege.
When I saw on the television everything that's going on, and I'm sitting in front of the TV for an hour and thinking, I need to do something, and down here there's nothing else to do, but giving blood's always something you can do when there's a tragedy like this.
Blood center officials say people all over the Carolinas have turned out to donate. The blood will be rushed north by whatever means available starting now.
It makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing. I know this is what God wants me to do, and to help my fellow man and to help my country, and I'm here.
Now, that's an attitude that you'll find not only in the Carolinas, but throughout the United States. People with a very sudden, a very serious devotion to fellow Americans, even though they're strangers thousands of miles away, an equally serious devotion to the United States of America, and that's evidenced by part of what's going on behind me here. And I'll tell you, covering this aspect of the story today, something that literally sends chills up and down my spine. It's people who saw this story on the news or heard it on the radio this morning. The first thing they thought was, how can I help? What part of myself, literally, can I give to help this situation? Again, the response here at this Red Cross branch, Red Cross branches throughout the Carolinas, has been overwhelming, so overwhelming, in fact, in some cases they've had to start turning people away. But joining me now live is Dennis James with the American Red Cross. Dennis, you do have a word for people who maybe tried to donate blood today but simply couldn't. What's that word?
Absolutely. We're going to be open tomorrow and the next day until we get our blood supplies back up to normal. We have really been gracious to the outpouring of the people here in the Myrtle Beach, Horry County area. We've collected over 60 pints of blood right now. Over another 100 is waiting in line. We need this blood. We need every person that we can get in the next coming weeks, for the next 2 to 3 weeks, to just constantly come back in who are able to give blood, and every 60 days thereafter when their time comes up again, or at least for the next 6 months, so we can get our blood supply back up to normal. We were already critical.
Now, of course, the number of fatalities, casualties, and just number of injuries still coming into us, far too early to even begin reporting that. The need for this blood is certainly not going away.
No, sir. We only had 80,000 units nationwide on hand. I've heard from CNN earlier that it was down to 60,000, and you can see the drastic pull on the blood supplies as we were going to this need right now. And we need every day. We're going to do extended hours tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. here at the Northwood Plaza Shopping Center unit.
All right, Dennis, again, thank you for your efforts and the efforts of your volunteers, of course, on the behalf of other Americans. As Dennis mentioned, extended hours tonight until 9 p.m. That counts for the Grand Strand as well as PD offices. And again, if you tried to donate blood today and were not able to, don't give up. For the next several weeks, of course, please come out and go ahead and do so. Reporting live in Myrtle Beach, Jim Armstrong, Wpde, News Channel 15.
Jim, thanks very much. Of course, at this point also, a lot of speculation as to who's responsible for these attacks. And as we see the wonderful spirit of folks there helping out, this is what is on a lot of people's minds. Who did this? Who committed this attack today on America? That's
right, but of course no confirmation on that. We're joined now by Coastal Carolina University's Professor of Politics, Richard Collin. Professor Collin, thanks so much for joining us. I know you've written several books and articles about terrorism, and when we first spoke with you this morning, you said that in all of your years of studying terrorism, though, the magnitude of this attack took you by surprise.
Yes, if you'd asked me yesterday if this was possible, I'd have said no, at least not possible for a Middle Eastern group. But it did happen, and all the indications are that the violence has come at us from the Middle East.
You've been talking to your students, I know, today, and your colleagues, Professor, at Coastal Carolina, about the fact we have many folks from the Middle East living here. in America. What's your message regarding that?
Well, I'm a little concerned. There's about 5 million Americans who are of Arab descent or have come here and emigrated from the Middle East. Most of them have come here to avoid the violence and the poverty and the dictatorship of the Middle East. And they're typically not part of the problem. They have not been the occasion of much violence. Most of them are supporters of their adopted country, and we should treat them gently in an hour of great difficulty for them.
So many of us are fearful of what's now to come, and there are a lot of families, especially those with children, who are grappling with all of this tonight. Any words of advice?
Yeah, I remember 11 years ago when the Iraqi war took place, many young children were frightened that it was somehow going to come here. It was going to come to the Grand Strand and Myrtle Beach and bother us. I think parents should not make the assumption that their children understand what's happened and understand that while this is a tragedy and a great act of violence, it's a distant act of violence, and it's unlikely to be a problem for us here. So parents may need to spend a little extra time with their kids, making sure that they understand that.
That's some very good advice. Professor Richard Cullen of Coastal Carolina. Professor, thanks for coming in tonight.
Well, the U.S. Army Reserve Center in Florence is under a heightened state of readiness.
Earlier today, Army tanker trucks barricaded the entrance to the Reserve Center on South Cashua Drive. Florence police officers also stationed at the center. According to the 81st Regional Support officials, more than 30,000 soldiers across the lower southeastern region are prepared to act in a national crisis. Governor Jim Hodges has ordered the South Carolina National Guard to call in all critical personnel and place them on standby. For the first time in the nation's history, there are no commercial aircraft flying anywhere. Soon after the attacks, the Federal Aviation Administration grounded all of the nation's airlines. Flights in and out of Myrtle Beach International here were stopped.
Flights from international countries are not being allowed to land on U.S. soil. They are being diverted to Canada. And you can imagine what kind of an enormous backlog of travel that this will create as hundreds of thousands of people find themselves unable to fly anywhere.
And it's just devastating. And it's, I don't know, I just feel violated. I feel like, wow, I wish I was home so I could call the people that I know.
We've increased our security a little bit, just to be, on the safe side. We've got a little more presence with our police officers. We've kind of tightened up at screening a little bit just to make sure that we are prepared for anything. We've certainly not received any threats or any indications that, we would have a security problem here at Myrtle Beach.
Once again, Myrtle Beach Airport has not received any threats, but travelers are going to find themselves stuck here, as they will at airports all over the country. The FAA says no planes will be allowed to fly until noon Eastern time tomorrow, and that's at the earliest.
And we heard that many planes that were in the air at the time of this were ordered to land immediately, many folks making emergency landings. Our own meteorologist, Ed Piotrowski, was on his way to a conference on an airplane this morning, and he was forced to land in Charlotte, North Carolina, just as the attacks were happening.
Ed joins us now live on the telephone to tell us what it was like in the airport at the time of the attacks. Ed, what was going on then?
At the airport itself, at first, everything was running smoothly and normally. It was about 5 minutes after we landed and got into the airport that the news was breaking on television, of course, and people were just completely and utterly shocked at what they were seeing on the television. And shortly thereafter, within a half hour, I would imagine, with everyone being stunned, they shut down the airport. All the locals were asked to go home, and of course, all flights at that point in time were completely canceled.
And at any time when you were on the aircraft, were you made aware why you were making an emergency landing?
Absolutely not. We had actually sped up apparently just a bit and landed a little bit early, but even after landing and walking through the airport, getting ready to make my connection to Nashville, there was no word or anything going through my head that gave me any indication that anything wrong was going on. I actually was talking to a friend on the phone who told me to check out the television, and that's how I actually found out, and that's when, of course, it spread through the airport very rapidly, and again, people were just stunned at what they were seeing and hearing on the television.
There were reports, Ed, earlier today of airports around the country, just you could almost hear a pin drop as the news came out and people started gathering around the television sets. Was that the case there in Charlotte?
Absolutely. Even with the televisions on and people that aren't even near the televisions, it was eerily quiet in there for most of the morning. People, very orderly, were leaving the airport and, again, just shocked, wondering what was next. Even the city of Charlotte was in a state of emergency for a while there. They were in fear that the Bank of America building, which I think is the largest building between Atlanta and New York City, could be a target. So there was a lot of fear there, a lot of ambulances and fire trucks going around. but for the most part, people were just eerily quiet, waiting to see what was going to happen.